I'm Samantha Miller, 24, and I just posted a photo in my cap and gown that made my entire family go silent. The acceptance letter they'd hidden from me 2 years ago was now framed next to my diploma, the ultimate proof that I'd discovered their betrayal and succeeded anyway. As I stood on that stage with the dean calling my name, I couldn't help but think about the drawer in my father's desk where my dreams had been buried, and how sweet this victory felt after everything they'd done to keep me trapped in that small town. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. This story is about to get wild, and I promise you won't want to miss how it ends. Growing up in Millfield, a town so small it barely registered on maps, was like living in a snow globe. Beautiful to look at from the outside, but completely enclosed with no real way out. My parents, Richard and Diane Miller, were fixtures in our community. Dad ran the local hardware store that had been in our family for 3 generations, and Mom taught second grade at Millfield Elementary. They were respected, well-liked, and utterly terrified of change. I was their only child, their precious girl, as Mom would say with that particular smile that always made me feel like a treasured possession rather than a person. From an early age, I understood that their love came with invisible strings. They supported my dreams, but only the ones that kept me within arm's reach. "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart," Dad would tell me, adding the unspoken, "as long as it's here," that hung in the air between us. I played the part of the perfect daughter. I got straight A's, captained the debate team, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and never missed Sunday dinners with my grandparents. But underneath my people-pleasing exterior beat the heart of someone who desperately wanted more. Someone who stayed up late scrolling through photos of cities I'd never visited, and universities with sprawling campuses where students from all over the world gathered to expand their minds and horizons. Berkeley was my dream school, the University of California, Berkeley. Even the name felt exotic in our small Midwestern town. I'd fallen in love with it during a school trip to California in my sophomore year of high school. The energy on campus, the diversity of the students, the palm trees swaying against a backdrop of historical buildings, it felt like stepping into another world, one where possibilities stretched as far as the Pacific Ocean. When I told my parents about applying there, they nodded and smiled in that peculiar way parents do when they think you're going through a phase. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, patting my hand. "But don't forget about State. It's only 30 minutes away, and they have an excellent education program." State. Always State. As if the university a half-hour drive from our house was the only reasonable option. "I'm applying to both," I said firmly. "And to Northwestern Michigan and UCLA, too." Dad looked up from his newspaper then, his eyes narrowing slightly. "That's a lot of application fees, Sammy, and out-of-state tuition is astronomical these days." "I've been saving from my job at the bookstore," I countered. "And I'll apply for scholarships. There's the National Merit one, and Berkeley has need-based financial aid." Their exchanged glance spoke volumes, but I pretended not to notice. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, perfecting my Berkeley application. The essay prompt asked about a time I'd overcome a significant challenge. I wrote about growing up in a place where comfort and security were valued above all else, and how I'd learned to nurture my curiosity despite having limited resources. I poured everything into that essay: my dreams, my frustrations, my determination to break free. The months that followed were a blur of studying for finals, working extra shifts at the bookstore, and checking the mail obsessively. Northwestern rejected me. Michigan waitlisted me. UCLA sent a thin envelope that might as well have had "better luck next time" printed on the outside. State, predictably, accepted me with a modest scholarship. And Berkeley? Nothing. Every day, I'd rush home from school to check the mail before my parents got home. Nothing. I created an online account to track my application status. Under review. Weeks passed. The status never changed. As the days ticked by, Mom started leaving college brochures for State on my bed. Dad casually mentioned that his friend's son could get me a summer job at the hardware store that could turn into something more permanent. Finally, in late April, I accepted defeat. Berkeley wasn't happening. My dreams of California sunshine and intellectual freedom were just that, dreams. I enrolled at State, forcing a smile when my parents took me out to celebrate at the nicest restaurant in town. Inside, I felt hollow. "You'll be close to home," Mom said brightly. "You can still have dinner with us on Sundays, and laundry will be so much easier." I nodded, pushing my food around my plate. "Yeah, great." State was fine. The professors were knowledgeable. The campus was pretty enough in the fall when the leaves changed colors, and I made a few friends in my education classes. But I felt like I was sleepwalking through my life. I joined clubs, maintained my GPA, and worked part-time at the campus library. On the outside, I was the same reliable Samantha. Inside, I felt a restlessness that grew with each passing semester. I started dating James in my sophomore year. He was studying engineering and had a quiet confidence I found attractive. Unlike most people in Millfield, he had traveled a year abroad in Japan during high school, backpacking through Europe the summer before college. He understood my desire to experience more of the world. "Why don't you transfer?" he asked one night as we studied together in the library. "If you're not happy here, do something about it." I sighed, closing my textbook. My parents would freak out, and besides, the application deadlines for fall are long past. "So apply for spring semester, or next fall," he shrugged. "You've got time." I let the idea take root. Transfer. Start fresh somewhere else. Somewhere far away from Millfield and State and the future that seemed predetermined from the moment I was born. That weekend, I went home to do laundry and have the obligatory Sunday dinner with my parents. While Mom was preparing dessert, Dad asked me to fetch some tax documents from his home office. As I searched through his filing cabinet, I accidentally knocked a stack of papers off his desk. Kneeling to gather them, I noticed a large envelope that had slipped partially under the desk. University of California, Berkeley. The return address jumped out at me immediately. The envelope was thick, unopened, with my name printed on the front. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The postmark date was from 2 years ago, April of my senior year of high school. 2 years ago. When I was checking the mailbox every day. When I was logging into the admission portal obsessively. When I finally gave up on my dream and enrolled at State. The room seemed to spin around me. I sat heavily in my dad's leather chair, staring at the envelope. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it was junk mail, designed to look like an acceptance packet? But I knew better. This was thick, the kind of envelope that contains welcome materials, not rejections. And it had been hidden, deliberately hidden, from me. "Samantha, did you find the tax forms?" Dad's voice called from downstairs. I shoved the Berkeley envelope into my backpack and grabbed the tax documents from the file where I'd found them. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he would hear it when I handed him the papers. "Here you go," I said, amazed at how normal my voice sounded when everything inside me was screaming. "Thanks, sweetheart." He smiled, completely unaware that my entire world had just been upended. "Your mom made your favorite apple crisp for dessert." I sat through that dinner in a fog, mechanically answering questions about classes and nodding at appropriate intervals. Inside, I was burning with a rage so pure it frightened me. They had stolen my future. They had made the decision for me, without my knowledge or consent. They had lied, by omission at the very least, for 2 whole years. Back in my dorm room that night, I finally opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Dear Samantha Miller, congratulations! We are pleased to offer you admission to the University of California, Berkeley for the fall semester. I had gotten in, and they had hidden it from me." The acceptance letter was accompanied by information about a partial scholarship. Not a full ride, but significant enough to make a difference. There were housing forms, course registration information, a welcome letter from the Dean of Students. All of it now useless, expired, dead. I called James, my voice breaking as I told him what I'd found. He came over immediately, holding me while I cried tears of loss and anger. "You need to confront them," he said finally. "What's the point?" I wiped my eyes. "It's too late now. It's not about changing the past. It's about honesty. And they need to know that you know." But when I imagined confronting my parents, all I could see was my mother's wounded expression, my father's defensive justifications. They would say they did it out of love, out of concern for my welfare, out of fear that I'd be too far away if something happened. They would make me feel guilty for being angry, and nothing would change except that Sunday dinners would become even more strained than they already were. No, confrontation wasn't the answer at least not yet. I needed a plan. The next morning I marched into my academic advisor's office and asked about transfer requirements for various universities, including Berkeley. It wasn't impossible, she told me. My GPA was excellent. I would need recommendation letters, transcripts, and of course financial resources. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into research. Berkeley's transfer application deadline for the following fall semester was in November, 6 months away. I needed to act fast. I picked up a second job waiting tables at a restaurant near campus to save money. I reconnected with my high school English teacher who had always believed in me, and she agreed to write a recommendation letter. I crafted a new essay, more passionate and determined than the first. All the while, I said nothing to my parents. I went home for dinners, nodded at their suggestions that I consider taking over Mom's teaching position when she retired, and kept the Berkeley letter hidden in my dorm room. Every time I felt my resolve weakening, I would read it again, reminding myself of what they had taken from me. In November, I submitted my transfer application to Berkeley and 5 other schools across the country. This time, I used James's apartment as my mailing address and created a new email account specifically for correspondence with universities. I wasn't taking any chances. When the spring semester ended, I told my parents I'd gotten a great opportunity to work as a camp counselor in upstate New York for the summer. In reality, I stayed in town, working both my jobs and saving every penny. The acceptance emails began arriving in March. NYU, Boston University, University of Washington, and finally Berkeley. again. 2 years later than it should have been, but it was still there, still possible. I accepted Berkeley's offer immediately and began making arrangements. The partial scholarship was still available for transfer students, though not as generous as the original offer. Combined with my savings and a student loan, I could make it work, but just barely. I would need to work part-time while studying, and summers would be spent earning rather than relaxing. But it would be worth it. Breaking the news to my parents was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I waited until May, when everything was already finalized. I chose a Sunday dinner, of course. Symmetry seemed important somehow. "I have something to tell you," I said, after Dad had finished telling a story about a difficult customer at the store. "I'm transferring to Berkeley for my junior year. I've already been accepted, and I'm starting in August." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, shock, anger. "What are you talking about?" Mom finally said. "You can't just transfer across the country in the middle of your degree." "Actually, I can." I kept my voice steady. "All my credits will transfer. I've already worked it out with both schools." "But why?" Dad sputtered. "You're doing so well at State. You've got friends there. Your classes are going well. Why would you want to leave?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been rehearsing in my head for months. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Berkeley letter, the original one, now worn from being read so many times. "I found this in your office last year, Dad. It was under your desk." I laid it on the table between us. "It's dated April 10th, 2 years ago. It was never opened, but it's addressed to me." The color drained from both their faces. Mom reached for Dad's hand, gripping it tightly. "Samantha," Dad began, his voice strained. "You have to understand." "No," I cut him off. "I don't have to understand anything. You hid my college acceptance letter from me. You made a life-altering decision on my behalf without even telling me. You lied to me for 2 years." "We were protecting you," Mom insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "California is so far away, so dangerous. You wouldn't have known anyone there. And the cost." "There was a scholarship," I said flatly. "And it wasn't your decision to make. It was mine." "You were 18, Dad countered. "Just a kid. You didn't understand what you were getting into." "I was legally an adult, and even if I wasn't ready then, you should have talked to me about it. Instead, you decided that what you wanted from me was more important than what I wanted for myself." The argument that followed was ugly. Voices were raised. Old grievances were aired. Mom cried. Dad shouted. I maintained my resolve, even when they pulled out the financial card. "We won't pay for this, Samantha," Dad finally said. "If you insist I'm going to Berkeley, you're on your own." I had expected this. "I know," I replied calmly. "I've saved enough for the first semester, and I've taken out loans for the rest. I've found a roommate situation near campus. I've got a job lined up at a cafe starting in September." Their shock at my preparedness was almost satisfying. Almost. "You've been planning this behind our backs?" Mom looked betrayed. "Like you hid my acceptance letter behind mine?" I countered. In the end, we reached an uneasy truce. They didn't approve, but they couldn't stop me. I left their house that night feeling both liberated and heartbroken. The relationship with my parents, already complicated, had fractured in ways I wasn't sure could ever be fully repaired. James drove me to the airport in August. We had decided to try long distance, though neither of us had much faith it would work. Some things, we both knew, weren't meant to last forever. "I'm proud of you," he said at the departure gate. "Not many people would have had the courage to do what you're doing." I hugged him tightly, grateful for his support during the most turbulent year of my life. "I'll miss you." "You'd better," he grinned. "Now go show Berkeley what they've been missing these past 2 years." Berkeley was everything I had dreamed of, and more. The campus was alive with energy and ideas. My classes challenged me, intellectually, in ways State never had. My roommates, 3 other transfer students from various parts of the country, quickly became close friends. Even working 20 hours a week at the cafe near campus couldn't dampen my enthusiasm for my new life. My relationship with my parents, meanwhile, deteriorated to occasional tense phone calls and stilted text messages. They didn't visit, and I didn't go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas that first year, claiming I couldn't afford the flight. In truth, I worked extra shifts during the holidays and squirreled away the money for the following semester's books. James and I broke up amicably during winter break. He met someone new at State, and I was too busy discovering myself to maintain the relationship properly. We remained friends, though, texting occasionally about our lives and sharing inside jokes that no one else would understand. My second year at Berkeley was easier financially. I received additional scholarships based on my academic performance, and I was hired as a research assistant for one of my professors, which paid better than the cafe. I still worked hard, but the constant anxiety about money gradually subsided. I declared a double major in education and public policy combination that married my original career path with my newfound passion for educational reform. I joined student government, volunteered with a literacy program in Oakland, and even studied abroad in Barcelona for a summer term, using money I'd saved specifically for that purpose. Through it all, the relationship with my parents remained strained. They had come to accept my decision grudgingly, but the trust between us had been severely damaged. We were polite with each other during our infrequent calls, but the easy affection of my childhood was gone, replaced by a careful civility that broke my heart even as I maintained it. 2 years passed in a blur of classes, work, new friendships, and experiences that expanded my world in ways I could never have imagined back in Millfield. As graduation approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. I had done it transferred to my dream school and thrived despite the obstacles. I had worked 2 jobs while maintaining a near-perfect GPA. I had secured a prestigious fellowship for the following year that would allow me to work on education policy in Washington, D.C. I had built a life for myself, by myself. The invitation to the graduation ceremony sat on my desk for days before I finally decided to send it to my parents. I wasn't sure they would come, wasn't sure I wanted them to come, but it felt like the right thing to do. A peace offering, of sorts. An acknowledgement that despite everything, they were still my family. To my surprise, they accepted. "We wouldn't miss it," Mom said when she called to confirm. Her voice sounded older, more hesitant than I remembered. "Your father and I are so proud of you, Samantha." The words should have warmed me, but they left me cold. Proud of what, exactly? The achievement they had tried to prevent? The independence they had never wanted me to have? Still, I made arrangements for them to stay in a hotel near campus and planned to meet them for dinner the night before the ceremony. It would be the first time we'd seen each other in person in nearly 2 years. The reunion was awkward at first. We hugged stiffly in the restaurant lobby, all of us older now, changed by the time and distance between us. Mom had more gray in her hair. Dad seemed to have shrunk somehow, less imposing than in my memories. We made small talk through appetizers, the weather in California versus Michigan, the traffic they'd encountered driving from the airport, the quaintness of the restaurant I'd chosen. It wasn't until our entrees arrived that Mom finally broached the subject we'd all been avoiding. Samantha, she began, setting down her fork. Your father and... I braced myself, expecting recriminations or perhaps more justifications for what they had done. We're sorry, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. What we did hiding that letter from you, it was wrong. We know that now. I stared at them, speechless. In all the scenarios I'd imagined for this dinner, an apology had never featured. We were scared, Mom continued. Scared of losing you to a place so far away. Scared you'd get hurt, or struggle, or decide never to come back to Millfield. We convinced ourselves we were protecting you, but the truth is, we were protecting ourselves. It was selfish, Dad added, and it backfired spectacularly. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You ended up going anyway, and we lost you in a different way. I felt tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. I'm right here. But you don't trust us anymore, Mom said sadly. And why would you? We betrayed your trust in the worst way. I couldn't deny it. The wound was still there, even if it had scarred over. I would have gone anyway, I told them. Even if you had given me the letter and voiced your concerns. Berkeley was my dream. We know that now, Dad nodded. We've had a lot of time to think about it, and seeing what you've accomplished here. He gestured around, as if the restaurant somehow represented all of Berkeley, all of my achievements. Well, it's clear you made the right choice for yourself. We just hope, Mom added, reaching across the table to touch my hand tentatively, that someday you might be able to forgive us. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, and saw not the manipulative monsters they had become in my mind over the past 2 years, but 2 flawed human beings who had made a terrible mistake out of misguided love. The realization didn't instantly heal the breach between us, but it cracked open a door that had been firmly shut. I'm working on it, I said finally. It was the most honest answer I could give. The graduation ceremony the next day was surreal. As I sat among my fellow graduates, waiting for my name to be called, I reflected on the unlikely path that had brought me here. The hidden letter, the painful discovery, the determination that had carried me through 2 years of hard work and sacrifice. When they announced Samantha Miller, graduating with honors in education and public policy, I walked across that stage with my head held high. In the audience, I could see my parents standing, applauding wildly, and for the first time in years, their pride didn't feel like a weight around my neck but a genuine celebration of what I'd accomplished not for them, but for myself. After the ceremony, as we posed for photos in my cap and gown, I had an idea. I asked Dad to hold my diploma while I reached into my bag and pulled out the framed Berkeley acceptance letter, the original one they had hidden, now preserved behind glass as a reminder of how far I'd come. Let's take a picture with both, I suggested, placing the framed letter next to the diploma in his hands. The recognition in his eyes was immediate. Pain, shame, and then a grudging respect flashed across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "It's part of the story. My story." We posed for the autonomy in my graduation regalia, flanked by my parents, holding both the beginning and end of my Berkeley journey. Then I took a selfie with just me and the two documents, the perfect visual representation of overcoming the obstacle that had nearly derailed my life. That evening, back in my apartment while my parents returned to their hotel to rest before their early flight the next morning, I posted the selfie to Instagram with a simple caption. They hid my college acceptance to keep me home, so I showed up to the graduation they thought I'd never attend. #BerkeleyGrad, #full-circle. I tagged my hometown, my high school, and several people from Millfield who had followed my college journey with varying degrees of support. Then I turned off my phone and went to sleep, emotionally exhausted by the events of the past 2 days. When I woke up the next morning and checked my phone, the post had exploded. Hundreds of likes, dozens of shocked comments, messages from old high school friends expressing disbelief and support, and nothing, absolutely nothing from my parents or anyone in their circle. Just a livid silence that spoke volumes. I felt a moment of regret. The post had been petty, a public airing of private pain that served no purpose except to hurt my parents when they had just extended an olive branch. I considered deleting it, but something stopped me. This was my truth, my experience, and after years of silence and secrets, maybe the truth deserved to be heard. I texted my parents to say goodbye, thanking them for coming to my graduation and wishing them a safe flight home. Dad responded with a terse, "Thanks, flying out now." Mom didn't respond at all. Later that day, I received a long email from Mom. She had seen the post, of course. She was hurt by the public shaming, she wrote, but she understood where it came from. "You're right to be angry," she concluded. "We're still learning how to make amends for what we did. Please be patient with us, even though we don't deserve it." Her honesty, her willingness to accept responsibility rather than getting defensive, touched something in me. I called her that evening, and we had the first real conversation we'd had in years. It wasn't easy. There were tears on both sides, recriminations and painful truths, but by the end, we had reached a fragile understanding. The road to rebuilding trust would be long, but we both wanted to try. In the weeks that followed, as I prepared to move to D.C. for my fellowship, I reflected often on the strange, twisted path that had brought me to this point. The hidden letter that was meant to trap me had instead propelled me forward with a determination I might never have discovered otherwise. The parents who had tried to clip my wings had inadvertently taught me to fly on my own. I graduated not just with a degree, but with a profound understanding of my own strength. I had faced betrayal, financial hardship, and the challenges of starting over in a new place, and I had thrived despite it all. The acceptance letter they hidden had changed the course of my life just, not in the way they had intended. As I packed up my Berkeley apartment, preparing for the next chapter in Washington, I carefully wrapped the framed acceptance letter and placed it in a box with my most treasured possessions. It would always have a place of honor in my home, wherever that might be, not as a reminder of my parents' betrayal, but as evidence of my own resilience. The relationship with my parents continued to evolve in the years that followed. There were setbacks and breakthroughs, moments of connection, and times when the old hurt resurfaced. But slowly, gradually, We built something new, a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than control and obedience. They visited me in D.C. The following spring, their first time in the nation's capital, I showed them around my world, introduced them to my colleagues, let them see the life I had created for myself. And I could tell they were genuinely proud, not because I was fulfilling their dreams for me, but because I was courageously pursuing my own. 5 years after graduation, when I was offered a position leading an education policy think tank back in California, Mom called to congratulate me. "Berkeley changed your life," she said thoughtfully. "Even though we tried to prevent it." It wasn't just Berkeley, I told her. It was finding out what I was capable of when I had to rely on myself. In a strange way, what you and Dad did forced me to become stronger than I might have been otherwise. "That doesn't excuse it," she said quickly. "No," I agreed. "But it helps me make sense of it. Every experience shapes us, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones." The framed acceptance letter still hangs in my office, a conversation starter that allows me to share my story with others who might be facing their own obstacles. Sometimes I look at it and marvel at how differently my life might have turned out if I had never found it, or if I had confronted my parents immediately instead of channeling my anger into action. I don't regret the path I took, difficult though it was. Every late night working double shifts, every moment of doubt, every lonely holiday spent away from family was all part of becoming the person I am now. The letter they hid didn't just represent an admission to a university, it was an invitation to discover my own strength, resilience, and capacity for forgiveness. They hid my college acceptance to keep me home, but in doing so, they set me irrevocably free. And that revelation, painful as it was, has made all the difference. I'm Samantha Miller, 24, and I showed up to the graduation they thought I'd never attend. But more importantly, I showed up for myself, and that's the real victory. 10 years later, my story took another unexpected turn. I was delivering a keynote address at an education conference in Chicago when a young woman approached me afterward. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a dog-eared copy of an article I'd written for The Atlantic about my experience. "Ms. Miller," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "your story saved me." Her name was Eliza, and she had been in a similar situation. Her parents had intercepted her scholarship offer to Juilliard, insisting that music wasn't a viable career path. She'd found my article during a dark period of self-doubt while attending the local community college. "When I read about what you did," she continued, eyes bright with emotion, "I applied again. I just finished my first year at Juilliard." We hugged like old friends, though we'd just met. Later that evening, over coffee, Eliza shared more details about her journey, and I found myself wondering how many others were out there, young people whose wings had been clipped by well-meaning but controlling parents. That conversation sparked a new passion project. Within 6 months, I had founded the Hidden Letter Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping young adults navigate family pressure and pursue their authentic educational and career paths. We provided scholarships, mentorship, and legal resources to those whose academic opportunities had been sabotaged or suppressed by family members. The organization quickly gained national attention. We were featured on major news outlets, and donation money poured in from unexpected places. Even more surprising were the stories, hundreds of them from people of all backgrounds who had experienced similar interference with their dreams. My inbox filled with messages. They tore up my art school acceptance. They refused to fill out financial aid forms for anywhere but my father's alma mater. They told the recruiters I wasn't interested when they polled. called. Each story reinforced the importance of the work we were doing. The most unexpected call came on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. I was reviewing scholarship applications when my assistant said my father was on the line. "Dad?" I answered cautiously. Our relationship had improved significantly over the years, but we still maintained certain boundaries. "I saw you on the morning news," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "The thing you're doing with those kids. The hidden letter thing." "Yes?" My guard went up instinctively. "Your mother and I have been talking," he continued. "We want to help." The silence that followed was heavy with a decade of complicated history. "Help how?" I finally asked. "Financially, for starters," he replied. "We've set aside some money, but also we thought maybe we could talk to parents, from the other side, help them understand what we didn't." It was the last thing I had expected. My parents, who had once hidden my acceptance letter, now wanted to prevent others from making the same mistake. "We were wrong, Sammy," Dad said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. "And we've had to live with that. If we can keep other parents from hurting their kids the way we hurt you, maybe some good can come from our mistake." The Foundation's annual gala that fall featured a panel discussion that left not a dry eye in the house. On stage sat 4 pairs of parents and their adult children, each sharing their stories of interference, discovery, forgiveness, and growth. My parents sat in the center, speaking with raw honesty about the letter they had hidden and the relationship they had nearly destroyed. "We thought we were protecting her," Mom told the audience, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Instead, we were protecting our own fears and insecurities. We almost lost the remarkable woman our daughter was meant to become." Dad nodded, adding, "The hardest lesson was realizing that our job as parents isn't to determine our children's paths, but to give them the confidence and support to find their own way, even when that way leads far from home." After the gala, a reporter asked me if I regretted posting that graduation photo that had exposed my parents' actions so publicly. I thought carefully before answering. "Regret isn't the right word," I said finally. "That post was part of my healing process at the time. Was it the kindest choice? Probably not. Was it necessary for me? Yes. And strangely enough, without that public accountability, we might not be standing here today with this foundation that's helping so many others." The Hidden Letter Initiative expanded beyond my wildest expectations over the next 5 years. We established chapters in every state, created a legal aid fund specifically for educational autonomy cases, and developed a curriculum for high schools about students' rights in the college application process. The most profound satisfaction, however, came from witnessing the reconciliations parents and children finding their way back to each other after years of estrangement, often through the facilitation programs we created. At our headquarters in San Francisco, we maintained a wall of framed acceptance letters, each one with a story of having been hidden, destroyed, or otherwise intercepted. Beside each was a photo of the student who had overcome that obstacle, whether by reapplying like I did or finding an entirely different path to their dreams. My original Berkeley letter hung in the center, now accompanied by a photo not just of me at graduation, but of my whole family at the Foundation's opening ceremony, all of us older, wiser, and committed to transforming our painful experience into hope for others. Life has a strange way of weaving meaning from our deepest wounds. What began as betrayal had blossomed into purpose, not just for me, but for thousands of others. The letter that was meant to stay hidden had instead become a beacon, illuminating a problem that had remained in the shadows for too long. I often think about that moment in my father's office, when I first discovered the envelope that would change everything. In my darkest hours during those difficult years at Berkeley, I had sometimes cursed that discovery, wondering if ignorance might have been kinder. Now I understand it was the most important moment of my life, not because it revealed my parents' deception, but because it revealed my own power to shape my destiny. Today, when I speak at universities, I bring that framed letter with me. Students crowd around afterward, sharing their stories in hushed, urgent tones. Some are living double lives, secretly pursuing majors their parents have forbidden. Others have been cut off financially for choosing the wrong career path. Many are simply afraid to disappoint the people they love by following their own dreams. To each one, I say the same thing. Your life belongs to you. Not your parents, not your community, not your past. You alone have the right to decide what success and fulfillment look like for you. Last month, I received an email that brought everything full circle. A high school senior from Millfield, my hometown, wrote to thank me for inspiring her to apply to film schools against her family's wishes. She'd heard about my story from her English teacher, who had saved that Atlantic article all these years. My acceptance letter came yesterday. She wrote, "I'm keeping it in a safety deposit box until graduation. Thanks to you, I know I'm not alone." I printed her email and added it to my office wall, a reminder that stories have power. My story, which began with a hidden letter and a broken heart, continues to ripple outward in ways I never could have imagined when I stood on that graduation stage, vengefully posting a photo to shame those who had tried to limit my potential. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it would be this. The greatest revenge isn't public vindication or even remarkable success. It's finding meaning in your pain and using it to light the way for others. It's turning what was meant to cage you into something that helps set others free. The letter they hid didn't define me. What defined me was what I chose to do after finding it, and that choice continues to define me. One hidden letter, one reclaimed dream, one healed relationship at a time. And if you're watching this from a place where your dreams feel suppressed or your choices controlled, remember, your acceptance letter, whatever form it takes, is out there waiting. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply reaching out your hand to claim it. I'm Samantha Miller, and this was never just about a college acceptance letter. It was about accepting myself and the sometimes painful journey that made me who I am. Thank you for listening to my story. As my story gained traction and the Hidden Letter Initiative's work expanded internationally, I received an unexpected invitation that would challenge me in entirely new ways. Harvard University's Graduate School of Education asked me to join their faculty as a visiting professor, teaching a course on educational autonomy and family dynamics. Standing in that hallowed lecture hall for the first time, facing 80 graduate students eager to learn about my work, I felt an almost dizzying sense of irony. 15 years earlier, I had been fighting just to control my own education. Now I was helping shape educational policy at one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. This semester, I told my students during our first session, we're going to explore the intersection of family systems, educational access, and personal agency. And we'll start with a question: who owns your future? The course quickly became one of the most popular electives in the program. Students from psychology, education policy, law, and social work filled the classroom each week, bringing perspectives that enriched our discussions in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Midway through the semester, I invited a special guest lecturer, my mother. The students sat in stunned silence as she candidly shared her perspective on our family's journey, from the moment they decided to hide my letter to her current role as the Patra, Foundation's parent advocate. "The most dangerous love," Mom told them, her voice steady but vulnerable, "is the kind that confuses possession with protection." I loved my daughter so much that I forgot she wasn't mine to control. After class, a student from South Korea approached us, visibly moved. "In my culture," she explained, "filial piety is everything. Children are expected to sacrifice their dreams for family expectations without question. What you're teaching here is revolutionary where I come from." Her words stayed with me, prompting our foundation to develop culturally specific resources for young adults navigating family pressures in collectivist societies. Within a year, we had translated our materials into 12 languages and established support networks in countries where educational autonomy was often viewed as Western selfishness rather than a fundamental right. The work wasn't without pushback. Conservative family organizations labeled us anti-family and destructive to parental authority. A particularly vocal senator from the Midwest called our legal aid program government-funded rebellion against traditional values. During a committee hearing, I found myself thrust into a national debate about the boundaries between parental rights and young adult autonomy. Cable news programs pitted me against family psychologists who warned of the dangers of undermining parental guidance. Op-eds questioned my qualifications, my motivations, even my own family history, digging up that viral graduation photo and spinning new narratives about what had really happened. The Foundation's board urged me to avoid these public confrontations, focusing instead on our direct services. But I remembered that young woman from Millfield who had hidden her film school acceptance letter in a safety deposit box, and all the others like her who had no voice in this conversation. So I stepped into the spotlight, armed with research, statistics, and thousands of personal testimonials. I testified before congressional committees, participated in town halls across the country, and engaged respectfully with those who viewed our work as threatening to family cohesion. The false choice between family loyalty and personal fulfillment is exactly what we're trying to eliminate, I explained during a particularly heated TV debate with a prominent family therapist. The healthiest families don't demand sacrifice of dreams, they celebrate individual growth while maintaining loving connections. The controversy, while exhausting, ultimately amplified our message. Applications for our scholarship program tripled. Our legal hotline was flooded with calls. Universities began examining their ROND, parental notification policies, and high schools invited our speakers to address seniors about their rights in the college application process. Through it all, my father emerged as an unexpected ally in these public forums. His perspective as a parent who had been on the other side carried unique weight, especially with skeptical audiences. Together, we developed a workshop series specifically for parents struggling to let go, helping them understand that supporting their children's independence wasn't losing them, it was loving them more fully. I thought keeping Samantha close would ensure her happiness. Dad would tell these groups, when actually I was just ensuring my own. The moment I realized the difference was the beginning of real parenting. In the spring of my second year at Harvard, I received a curious email from the admissions office at Berkeley. They were conducting research on the long-term impacts of their admission decisions and had come across my story. Would I be willing to speak with them about my Serena experience? The Zoom call included several admissions officers, the dean of undergraduate education, and a research team studying barriers to enrollment among accepted students. They had questions about my delayed attendance, but also about what Berkeley could do to help other students in similar situations. We started tracking our acceptance packets, the lead researcher explained. When they're not acknowledged within a certain time frame, we follow up directly with the applicant through multiple channels. Your story helped us recognize this gap in our process. I was stunned to learn that my personal ordeal had sparked an institutional change that would benefit countless future students. By the end of the call, they had invited me to join a newly formed advisory committee on admission accessibility, a role I accepted immediately. Working with Berkeley brought unexpected healing. Walking those familiar paths as a respected advisor rather than the struggling transfer student I had once been gave me a sense of completion, of having come full circle in the healthiest possible way. During one visit to campus, I found myself standing outside my old cafe, where I had worked those endless shifts to make ends meet. On impulse, I went inside and introduced myself to the manager, explaining that I had been a student barista there years ago. Miller? He checked his records. Wait, Samantha Miller? Your picture is in our back office. You're the one who established the emergency fund for student employees. I had almost forgotten. During my final semester, I had donated part of a research stipend to create a small emergency fund for fellow student workers facing unexpected financial crises, textbooks, medical bills, car, repairs, anything that might force them to drop out. It was my way of paying forward the kindness shown to me by co-workers who had covered shifts when I was overwhelmed with finals. That fund has grown, the manager told me proudly. Former employees keep contributing. It's helped over 200 students stay in school while working here. These moments of unexpected impact continued to emerge, reminding me that our actions create ripples we may never fully comprehend. A scholarship recipient goes on to start a mentoring program in their hometown. A parent who attended our workshop repairs a relationship with their estranged child. A university changes its admission procedures to prevent interference. In my third year leading the foundation, I was invited to speak at a Millfield High School graduation ceremony, the very school I had graduated from 15 years earlier, my head filled with dreams of Berkeley that had been temporarily derailed. Standing at the podium, looking out at rows of seniors perched on the edge of their futures, I felt a profound sense of completion. Many of their parents had been my classmates. Some had followed my story from the beginning. Others knew me only as the local girl who had made good on the national stage. The path between who you are today and who you will become rarely runs in a straight line, I told them. Sometimes the detours, the obstacles, even the betrayals become the most important parts of your journey. They reveal not just what you want, but what you're willing to fight for. After the ceremony, my old English teacher, the one who had written my recommendation letter for Berkeley all those years ago, pressed something into my hand. It was a faded photocopy of my original college application essay, the one about nurturing curiosity despite limited resources. I've kept this to show my students what determination looks like on paper, she said, her eyes crinkling with pride. You wrote your future into existence long before you knew what form it would take. Later that night, I drove past my childhood home, now occupied by a young family with bicycles scattered across the front lawn. I thought about the girl who had lived there, who had checked the mailbox every day with such desperate hope. I wished I could tell her that the letter would eventually find its way to her and that when it did, it would unlock doors she hadn't even imagined existed. The Foundation's 10th anniversary gala coincided with the publication of my book, Hidden Letters: Reclaiming Educational Autonomy in the Age of Helicopter Parenting. The event brought together scholars, policymakers, donors, and most importantly, hundreds of young adults whose educational journeys had been supported by our programs. As I looked out across the ballroom, I saw my personal story reflected and magnified in so many others, each with their unique variations, challenges, and triumphs. What had begun as a single act of parental interference had blossomed into a movement, a community, a cause larger than any one person's experience. My parents, now in their 70s, served as honorary chairs of the event. Watching them move through the crowd, sharing their hard-earned wisdom with younger parents just beginning to navigate the college process with their own children, I felt a complex emotion for which there is no adequate name, something beyond forgiveness or reconciliation, something like grace. "You've built something extraordinary from our mistake," Mom whispered to me during a quiet moment. "I'm not sure we deserve to be part of it, but I'm grateful every day that you've allowed us to be." I squeezed her hand. "The Foundation isn't about deserving. It's about becoming. All of us, becoming something better together than we were separately." That night, we unveiled our most ambitious initiative, yet a nationwide awareness campaign about educational autonomy rights. Featuring billboards, public service announcements, and a dedicated website where young adults could access legal resources, emergency housing information, and peer support networks. The campaign's tagline, displayed prominently behind me as I made the announcement, read simply, "Your future, your choice, your right." Beneath these words was an image of an opened acceptance letter, light streaming from its contents, illuminating a path forward. As applause filled the room, I caught James's eye from across the crowd. He had flown in for the gala, still a friend after all these years, now a successful engineer with a family of his own. He raised his glass in a silent toast, and I nodded in acknowledgement of how far we'd both come from those study sessions at State when he'd first encouraged me to transfer. Later, as guests began to depart, a young woman approached me clutching a copy of my book. "Would you sign this?" she asked. "It's for my mother. She did what your parents did, hid my acceptance to culinary school." I opened the book, pen poised. "What would you like me to write?" She thought for a moment. "Something about forgiveness, maybe? We're trying to work things out." I considered her request carefully, then wrote, "The hardest letters to write are the ones that begin with, 'I understand.' May this be the beginning of a new chapter for both of you." As she read my words, tears filled her eyes. "That's exactly it. She's trying so hard now to understand. Understanding goes both ways," I told her gently. "Sometimes parents make terrible mistakes out of love. It doesn't excuse what they did, but recognizing the misguided love behind their actions can help heal the breach." She nodded, clutching the book to her chest. "I'm going to cooking school next fall. My mom's even helping me look for apartments near campus." "That's the real victory," I said, echoing words I had written to myself long ago. "Not just achieving your dream, but transforming a relationship in the process." As I packed up my notes from the podium later that night, I found myself reflecting on the long, strange journey from that hidden letter to this moment. The acceptance I had fought so hard for had led to an education far beyond what any university could provide, an education in resilience, in forgiveness, in turning personal pain into collective purpose. And isn't that ultimately what education is meant to do? Not just fill our minds with knowledge, but transform our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. Berkeley hadn't just taught me about public policy and educational theory, it had taught me who I was when everything familiar was stripped away, who I could become when faced with obstacles that seemed insurmountable. The letter they had hidden all those years ago had contained not just an acceptance to a university, but an invitation to become the author of my own life. An invitation I had accepted, eventually, on my own terms. Looking out at the empty ballroom, I silently thanked that hidden letter for all it had set in motion, the struggle, the growth, the purpose I might never have found without that particular wound to heal. Some betrayals, it seems, become benedictions when viewed through the lens of time and transformation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, policy battles to fight, programs to develop, stories to amplify. But tonight, in this moment of quiet completion, I allowed myself to acknowledge how far I had come from that drawer in my father's desk, and how many others had joined me on this unexpected journey of reclamation and, quote, renewal. The most powerful letter, after all, isn't the one offering admission to an institution, it's the one we write with our lives, declaring our right to define our own success, chart our own course, and transform our deepest disappointments into gifts for others. That's a letter no one can hide, and everyone deserves the chance to write. If you're enjoying this story, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this. Now let me tell you what happened next. The morning after our 10th anniversary gala, I woke to a notification that changed everything again. My phone lit up with a message from a producer at one of the major streaming platforms. They wanted to adapt my story into a limited series. My immediate reaction was resistance. Could my personal journey, something so intimate and complex, really be translated to the screen without losing its nuance? Would dramatizing the painful parts reopen old wounds for my parents? Would viewers understand the complicated emotions behind each decision, or would they simply pick sides, vilifying my parents and casting me as a one-dimensional victim-turned-hero? I scheduled the call anyway, curious about their vision. The producer, a thoughtful woman named Renata with credits on several acclaimed biographical adaptations, surprised me with her approach. We don't want to make this a simple revenge tale, she explained. What drew us to your story is the complexity how you turned betrayal into purpose without sugarcoating the pain or demonizing your parents. It's about the gray areas of love, control, forgiveness, and finding your path. After months of careful consideration and many conversations with my family, I agreed to serve as an executive producer on the project, maintaining some creative control over how our story would be told. The experience was surreal, watching casting sessions for actors to play younger versions of myself, my parents, James, and all the other people who had shaped my journey. The series, titled The Hidden Letter, premiered 18 months later to critical acclaim and, more importantly, sparked exactly the kind of nuanced conversations I had hoped for. Social media exploded with viewers sharing their own stories of educational sabotage, family control, and the complicated path to autonomy. I never realized what my parents did was actually common, one viewer commented on our foundation's page. I thought I was the only one whose parents threw away college brochures from schools they didn't approve of. The show's popularity brought unprecedented attention to our cause. Overnight, our website traffic increased tenfold. Our legal helpline couldn't keep up with calls. Universities and high schools across the country reached out about hosting workshops. This new spotlight came with complications. Conservative pundits labeled the show anti-family propaganda. Religious organizations accused us of encouraging rebellion against parental authority. I received death threats serious enough to warrant security at public appearances. More painfully, distant relatives emerged from the woodwork, some offering support, others sharing their versions of what really happened with the press. A cousin I barely knew claimed on a popular podcast that my parents had only hidden the letter because I had been unstable as a teenager, a complete fabrication that nonetheless gained traction in certain circles. Through it all, my parents stood firmly beside me, declining interviews, but issuing a simple statement. The series portrays difficult truths about mistakes we made. While some details have been dramatized, the core story is accurate. We support our daughter and the important work of her foundation. Their unwavering support during this public dissection of our most private failures touched me deeply. We had truly come full circle from them hiding my future to protect their own comfort, to standing publicly in discomfort to protect the work that had grown from that very act. The show's success led to unexpected opportunities. A major tech company offered to fund a comprehensive study on parental interference in higher education, giving us data we had previously only guessed at. Nearly 20% of college-bound students reported some form of parental sabotage of applications or acceptances, with significantly higher rates among first-generation college students and those pursuing fields their families didn't approve of. Armed with this research, we expanded our preventative programs, partnering with guidance counselors nationwide to identify at-risk students before interference could occur. We developed secure digital application systems that allowed students to apply to colleges without parental access to acceptances. We created emergency housing programs for students who faced being cut off financially for their educational choices. The most meaningful development, however, came from an unlikely source. A group of parents who had watched the series formed their own organization, Parents for Educational Autonomy. These were mothers and fathers who recognized their own controlling tendencies in my parents' actions and wanted support in letting go. "We love our children desperately," their founder explained during a joint webinar with our foundation. "Sometimes that love becomes fear, and fear becomes control. We're learning together how to support without suffocating." We began collaborative programming with this parent group, creating family mediation services for situations where communication had broken down around educational choices, often bringing parents and their young adult children together in facilitated conversations revealed misunderstandings that had festered for years. "I thought she wanted to move across the country to get away from me," one mother confessed during a session I observed. "I took it personally, and I thought you didn't believe in me," her daughter responded. "That you didn't think I was capable of making it on my own." These breakthrough moments reinforced what I had learned through my own journey. The path to healing rarely leads through public vindication or assigned blame, but through the harder, messier work of mutual understanding. 20 years after finding that hidden letter, I returned to Millfield for my high school reunion. Walking through those familiar hallways felt like visiting a museum dedicated to a former version of myself, interesting but distant, recognizable but no longer quite real. Former classmates approached me throughout the evening, many having watched the series or read my book. Some shared their own stories of parental expectations and thwarted dreams. Others admitted they had envied my perfect family back then, never imagining the complexities beneath the surface. My old debate coach, now retiring after 4 decades of teaching, pulled me aside near the end of the night. "I always wondered why you didn't go to Berkeley right away," he said. "You were the most determined student I ever had. It didn't make sense that you'd settle for state." I smiled, appreciating his perception after all these years. "I didn't settle in the end." "No," he agreed. "You certainly didn't. And now you're helping others not to settle either." As I drove past my parents' house that night, still their house, though they spent winters in Arizona, now I thought about how places shape us, both in our desperate efforts to escape them and in the ways they never quite leave our, quote, blood. Millfield had felt like a trap once, a snow globe I needed to shatter to survive. Now I could see it more clearly, not as a prison, but simply as too small a pond for what I had needed to become. There was nothing wrong with those who stayed, who found fulfillment within its boundaries. The tragedy would have been in forcing someone to stay who was built to explore beyond them. The following morning, before heading to the airport, I made one final stop. The local high school had invited me to speak at a special assembly about educational autonomy. As I entered the auditorium, I was stunned to see not just students, but their parents as well, hundreds of families seated side by side, preparing to engage with these difficult topics together. The most valuable education often happens outside classroom walls, I told them. It happens in the space between who others expect you to be and who you discover you are. It happens when you advocate for your own future while honoring the love, however imperfectly expressed, that seeks to protect you. Afterward, a line formed of parents and teens wanting to speak with me. One father, voice breaking, said, "I've been pressuring my son to attend my alma mater, but he wants to study marine biology in Florida. I realize today I've been making the same mistake your parents made." His son, standing awkwardly beside him, looked up in surprise. "We're going to tour the Florida campus next month," the father continued, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Together. These small reconciliations, these moments of growth and connection, are the true measure of our foundation's success, not the size of our budget or the reach of our programs, but the individual relationships healed, the dreams preserved, the futures reclaimed. My own relationship with my parents has settled into something I never could have imagined during those raw, painful years after discovering the hidden letter. We speak weekly, visit regularly, disagree occasionally, and love each other through it all. The hurt hasn't disappeared. Such fundamental betrayals leave permanent marks, but it has been integrated into a larger, more complex understanding of our shared humanity. Last Christmas, Mom gave me a special gift, a handcrafted wooden box with letters engraved on the lid. Inside was a collection of notes they had written to me over the years, but never sent during my struggling time at Berkeley, after our confrontation, following my graduation, throughout the development of the foundation. Letters full of pride, regret, love, and their own process of growth. "We were too ashamed to send these at the time," she explained. "Too afraid they wouldn't be enough. But I thought you should have them now." Reading their words, Dad struggled to understand the changing world, Mom's fear of losing connection with her only child. Both of them gradually recognizing the gift of my independence gave me a perspective on our journey that even the most honest conversations hadn't provided. The final letter, dated just a few months ago, ended with words that will stay with me always. "You taught us that the greatest act of parental love isn't holding on, but celebrating as your child soars beyond the boundaries of your own imagination. Thank you for not giving up on us while you refuse to let us limit you. That wooden box sits on my desk now, next to the framed Berkeley acceptance letter, twin artifacts of a journey none of us could have anticipated, but all of us have been transformed by. As the 25th anniversary of that fateful discovery approaches, I've been reflecting on legacy, not just the Foundation's work or the policy changes we've helped implement, but the deeper currents that flow from one generation to the next. I have no children of my own, having chosen to channel my energies into my work, my relationships, and mentoring the young people who come through our programs, but I think often about what I would want any child of mine to know, that their future belongs to them, that my love would never be conditional on them following a path I had envisioned, that mistakes, even terrible ones, made out of love can be pathways to growth if we have the courage to acknowledge them. Perhaps that is the most meaningful outcome of finding that hidden letter, not just the life I reclaimed for myself, but the thousands of lives touched by the ripples of that single act of deception and the subsequent journey toward healing. The letter they hid didn't define my future after all. What defined it was the decision I made upon finding it to fight not just for my education, but for my right to self-determination, to transform betrayal into purpose, to choose creation over resentment. When young people ask me now if I would change, what happened if I would go back, and wish that letter had never been hidden, my answer surprises them. No, I tell them honestly, because then I would have simply gone to Berkeley. I wouldn't have learned what I was capable of. I wouldn't have discovered how to stand on my own. And I wouldn't have found this calling that has given my life such meaning. Their expressions are often skeptical. How could anyone be grateful for such a betrayal? It's not about being grateful for the wrong that was done, I explain. It's about recognizing that our deepest wounds sometimes become our most profound sources of connection to others. It's about acknowledging that the path to our most meaningful life rarely runs in a straight line. If you're watching this and facing your own hidden letter, whatever form it takes, know that the story doesn't end with discovery. It begins there. The betrayal, the obstacle, the limitation others have tried to impose, these are not the conclusion of your journey, but merely the first chapter. The rest of the story belongs to you, and if you've hidden someone else's letter literally or metaphorically, it's never too late to make amends. Not through grand gestures or public confessions, through the quieter, harder work of respecting their autonomy going forward, of supporting their wings rather than clipping them, of loving them enough to let them fly beyond your field of vision. Our Foundation's offices worldwide display a simple motto beneath our logo. Every letter finds its recipient eventually. It's both a promise to those whose opportunities have been intercepted and a gentle warning to those who might be tempted to interfere. The truth always emerges. Dreams deferred often return with greater force. And sometimes the very obstacle meant to block a path becomes the foundation for building something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. The acceptance letter my parents hid led not just to my Berkeley education, but to an education in human nature, in resilience, in the complex interplay of love and control. It led to a purpose larger than any career I might have pursued otherwise. It led, ultimately, to liberation not just for me, but for countless others who found in my story the courage to reclaim their own. The letter they hid to keep me home opened doors far beyond any university. And for that unexpected outcome, though, never for the act itself, have found a curious kind of gratitude. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Share in the comments if you've ever had someone try to control your future and how you handled it. Our community learns so much from each other's experiences. Remember, the most important acceptance letter isn't the one from any institution, it's the one you write to yourself, accepting your right to define your own path, no matter who tries to interfere with it.